If you've ever felt that sharing your authentic self led to separation rather than connection, if you've ever experienced a state where telling the truth was threatening rather than affirming, or if you've experienced love to be very conditional and dependent on your correct behavior, then you might have learned that authenticity comes at a price. A price that you might consciously or unconsciously not be willing to pay. Hi there, I'm Anne-Katrin and I'm occasionally awake. I'm here to help you inspire your awakenings, heal yourself and reawaken your life. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. I have a confession to make. I've avoided personal storytelling in most of my videos so far, although that was something that I consciously wanted to include in what I share with you here. I didn't do it so far because the idea felt kind of beyond my comfort zone after all. Now, this is not to say that I've been inauthentic in any way, but I have actively avoided authenticity. I edited out any quirks, any loud laughs, any comicalness of the situation, and I stick to the script as much as possible. That is, until I realized that there was something missing. And that's a little bit more of me. I realized that my risk assessment has come to a false conclusion. One that is indeed quite typical of people who struggle to express their authentic selves. Personally, I was used to reacting, to going second. If I knew the rules, I could make sure to meet them. This here is me first. It's self-expression without knowing the rules, because as it turns out, there are none. See, especially when we've learned that only parts of us, only a certain version of us is likable or acceptable or deserving of love and connection, we can tend to project our inner requirements onto the social situations that we find ourselves in. If it feels like this, however, and your personal authentic self-expression is constantly censored and compromised, that might very well mean that you are stuck in survival mode and struggle to risk being authentic in your everyday lives and in the connections that you make. In that case, you might very well project your personal need for perfection onto others' expectations of you. And if you can't meet the level of perfection you set for yourself, you might very well not only struggle with being perfect, which is an ideal that cannot be met anyway, but you might also struggle to merely feel good enough. Please know that from that state, it's difficult for people to mirror good enoughness or authenticity back to you. And it becomes a circle. There are different reasons for why we might struggle to show up authentically. We might avoid putting our likability at risk. We might want to avoid being vulnerable in front of other people so as to not become a potential target of ridicule. We might prefer to conform to an opinion of a group that we do not necessarily share personally in order to stay part of that very group. When we are inauthentic, when we are not yet daring to express a greater level of authenticity, we are missing the very point we're trying to make. We seek appreciation and certainty and deep connection, but we often end up someplace else with superficial encounters that cannot build to soul connections. With the pressure to keep performing that edited version we've created of ourselves, and with other people's false expectations of how we're going to show up next time. Now let me share with you some essential truths about authenticity and inauthenticity that I've learned along the way. Inauthenticity can only come at the cost of energy because it is an unnatural state. Inauthenticity can also only come at the cost of connection because what it does is it puts a price tag on social interactions. It labels them because, as you might know, people are not usually inauthentic to the same degree to everybody in their lives. There are different people that they feel a different level of safety and certainty around, so that a social encounter basically gets judged on how much authenticity can be allowed in that conversation. Of course, that might happen totally unconsciously, but in case you ever came out of a conversation and wondered, but why did I react the way I reacted? Why did I say, oh yeah, I like that. Yeah, I agree, when you actually did not agree? That's a typical thing people do in order to stay connected when they've already judged how connection can be maintained in that situation and in that social encounter and connection. Inauthenticity means going against the current, against the natural flow of self-expression, in the illusion that the higher price lies in the risk of vulnerability, of potentially not being liked or loved, of not being good enough, of being rejected. Inauthenticity comes from an ego that suppresses the natural expression of heart and soul for the sake of illusory survival. Authenticity, by contrast, comes from a free, untamed heart and soul. Inauthenticity desperately tries to secure conditional connections, and yet is the very antidote to real connection. Authenticity, by contrast, creates unconditional connections, in which you are welcome as you are. Inauthenticity calculates how can I behave and act so that I belong. Authenticity trusts I am how I am, therefore I belong. Inauthenticity cannot attract our soul connections. What it does attract instead is rejection and superficial encounters, in which we feel like we are not seen to the core of our being, because we never actually dare to show that core, to show our heart and soul in the first place. We didn't take the initial risk when it was a question of acting rather than reacting. And once we are reacting to the created expectations of others, there's already a baseline of falseness that might have been introduced that it's even harder to get away from. Authenticity, by contrast, rejects inauthenticity and attracts our soul connections. Inauthenticity undermines our own integrity. Authenticity strengthens that very integrity. In short, inauthenticity has us pay a price that's simply not worth paying. When we show up authentically to others, we show up to our own truth and our own self-integrity. And that's how we invite people with that same level of truth and integrity into our lives. And that is what builds the lasting foundation for unconditional connections, in which we can make the experience that we are welcome and perfect and good enough and cherished and lovable exactly for who and how we are. We so often appreciate other people's vulnerability and authenticity, because as we see how that can go, as we see other people being accepted for who they are, as we accept other people who are quirky and just have a personality of their own, and we still think they're fabulous for the individual that they are, we are up to a point freed from our own burden to constantly deliver that edited version of ourselves that we think is the only version that is acceptable to others. Seeing other people in their authenticity can free us from the repressive act of holding back, staying silent, keeping it in, of censoring our own creative, fabulous impulses. Have you ever noticed how, in a world in which perfection and fearlessness are proclaimed, we crave people's imperfect self-expression, not to see them stumble, but to witness them getting back up, to witness them in their own personal process of growth, witnessing them being good enough so that we can be ensured that we too are good enough. Good enough to be liked, good enough to belong, good enough to show up authentically. Thank you for watching. If you resonated with this, please like and subscribe. This video is related to the awakenings to the ego and to the conscious self. If you want more insights on the 4 types of awakenings and how to experience them in your life occasionally, visit me at occasionallyawake.com to inspire your awakenings. Bye.